Um, okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prime Alumni and Instructor Reunion. The goal of the webinar today is to introduce you to Prime students and an instructor and kind of give you a feel for what a coding bootcamp experience like Prime Digital Academy is really like, and to hear where our alumni are at now. So my name is Hillary Hines, and I'll be hosting the discussion for today. My role at Prime is working with people that are interested in changing their careers and life with Prime by launching rewarding careers as web developers. Just a little bit about Prime. Prime is a full-time immersion tech learning program. Our accelerated 20-week full stack engineering program helps students land high-paying, in-demand, and rewarding jobs as web developers. We're super excited today. We have exciting news that we are opening a new campus in Kansas City, Missouri. So we are super excited to officially be joining that community. We've been super busy connecting with top tech employers, really kind of learning about Casey's need for tech talent. And we're just super proud. So Prime's holistic approach and kind of focus on really building relationships and connections to community really helps students from all backgrounds break into the industry. So to celebrate our new campus location in Kansas City, I've invited Prime instructor Scott Bromander. Scott, if you can wave. Hey. He will be the lead instructor for Prime Digital Academy's first Kansas City cohort. Scott was also the instructor to our alumni in the webinar today, now working as web developers. And they were also a part of Prime's very first cohort at our Minneapolis campus in 2015. So further ado, I'd like to kind of go around the room and introductions. I think I will start with Scott. So Scott, can you tell me a little bit about your background, including your role in launching Prime Digital Academy in Minneapolis and what you're up to in Kansas City?
Yeah, sure thing. You can hear me, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, excellent. So just the really quick kind of update, in general update of things. Prior to, where to start? Okay, so I guess I started my career kind of just really in Best Buy retail. I worked there when I was 16. It was kind of my high school job and my college job. I went and got a degree in game design, actually, of all things. And so making video games was kind of a dream. And then kind of after I graduated college, I didn't like really have the skills I needed to like get a job. And so, long story short, I took a series of roles within Best Buy corporate and had a great experience there. Helped kind of I transitioned from the store and into the kind of the corporate setting, where I worked a little bit on an order management system and kind of the support side of that. And really then at that point got into technical training as well too. So was a technical trainer, got to fly around the country in my 20s and teach and roll out this program that I was helping support. At that time, retail in general was kind of downsizing as an industry. And so, we had gotten married. I got married at that point, and our first child was on the way. And really about 6 months out from Jackson being born, they sat me down and said, hey, Scott, Best Buy is reducing, as a company, and, we'd love for you to stay with us, but right now your position's being eliminated. And they were very generous, and Best Buy's a great company, and they gave me 6 months to kind of figure out what to do next. And so I looked at my wife at the time, and I had said, or she had kind of said to me, like, well, what do you want to do? And I had said, well, I did a little bit of programming in college, and I think that sounds really interesting, and I really want to get into that. So long story short, 6 months of just turmoil in our life and kind of self-studying and self-directing and using books and different online resources. I managed to eke myself into this little development shop called the Nerdery, at least they were little at the time. And there I spent about 3 or 4 years writing software, and I developed code for companies like Best Buy and like Target, to name a few. And also kind of what was happening at that time too is that I had taken kind of that training experience that I had at Best Buy, along with the software development experience I was doing at the Nerdery, and I ended up teaching college at night. I actually taught college online. So many years of doing both software development and education, Nerdery got to this point where they're like, hey, we should, we're going to branch off and basically start this school. And so the result of that is Prime Academy, and Tracy and Alicia were part of our first cohort. So they trust us as this big crazy adventure. And I did Prime initially for about probably about 3 years, and I had built up Minneapolis and felt really strongly about it, and hired the instruction staff, hired the directors to take over, and really helped stabilize the Minneapolis community. But I'm a builder. I like building things. I like that function. It's just kind of the software engineer in me. So I'd moved on briefly to go out to Arizona to help a different educational institution. I wasn't really feeling it, so I called up my friends at the Nerdery and at Prime and said, hey guys, I really liked how everything felt there, and wondering if you guys want to do something different, do something new. They're like, hey, why don't you come develop software again for a bit? I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. So I've been back with Nerdery for about since April, so it's December now, so 8-9 months. This round I got a chance to write code for companies like Google and Verizon, just to name a few. And it's been awesome. And so as we've been kind of doing that, we've also been talking about this concept of this new campus. And so we talked a lot about many different geographies. And in the end, I felt really strongly about what Kansas City is and how Kansas City values match Minneapolis values. And it just seemed like a very logical thing to kind of work and operate in the Kansas City space. So I moved out here in June. And we've been, like, as Hillary had mentioned, we've been kind of talking to companies and really meeting the community, meeting nonprofits, and figuring out how we can best support. And is Prime right for Kansas City? Are there people who need help, and do they want our help? And in the end, it just seems like a slam dunk for everybody. So, like, flash forward to now, that's a huge kind of history. But I'm back with Prime officially now, and now I'm having a webinar with you. So that's like the condensed version of all the things. But yeah, that's
awesome.
me.
So you're boots on ground, kind of rallying our first cohort in Kansas City.
Yeah.
Cool. Now on to our alumni. Don't feel like you have to give that big a background if you don't want. But yeah, can you tell us, we'll start with Tracy. Tracy, if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you're doing before you enrolled at Prime, and where you're working now.
Sure. So I actually kind of didn't really have a career. I didn't really have a thing that I was doing until about 7.5 years ago or so. I started working as a temp receptionist at this little place called the Nerdery, and kind of was around tech, and I thought tech was really cool, and I was just kind of interested in the culture that was around it and how people were so proud of what they were doing. So then when some of the people from Prime were like, hey, or, from the Nerdery were like, hey, we're going to try and do like a cohort, like a class where people can actually become developers without doing the 4 years of college. We're looking for people who are interested. And I kind of went, yes, and jumped at it. So I've now been developing for about 3.5 years, I think. I was working originally at a small place in St. Paul called Reher that they do software for higher education. And now I'm actually contracting with a Fortune 500 financial company to help them build a tool that essentially will help keep their own developers. It's basically something called a component library. So they can actually, all of the developers will be able to use it and utilize it to become better developers, more consistent developers, and then also stick with design. So it's kind of been this really cool, fun career explosion in the last 4 years.
Career explosion. I like it. How about Alicia? If you could introduce yourself, say a little bit about what you were up to before you enrolled at Prime and what you're doing now.
Yeah, hi, Alicia. So I actually had a very crazy career before Prime. I actually had been everything from hospitals to a pallet recycler to working with a TV personality, and ended up eventually working at this little company called Nerdery too, and started kind of getting my toes dipped a little more in learning about software. My family has always had software in our life. My sister's actually an IT person, her husband, my husband. And so I kind of really had this drive. I actually used to talk to Scott when we worked together a lot about what is it like to code? What is it, all these pieces? Eventually left the nerdery, ended up at a different dev shop called MentorMate, where I did sales. Found out I'm not a salesperson because I have just don't have it in me. And I ended up actually getting laid off from there because they were purchased by Taylor Corporation. And during that time where I was trying to figure out next steps in my life and my career, if there was going to be a career, I kind of sent out an SOS to people and said, hey, I'm just looking for anything right now, and give me some ideas. And Scott was putting together Prime and reached out to me and just said, hey, used to dig it when we were working together. What do you think about trying? And he's like, you have 3 days to apply. And so I said, okay, let's do this. I'm going to try, and what's the worst that can happen? So here we are 3.5 years later, and I am doing it. I am actually a software engineer 2 at C.H. Robinson in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. We are a third-party logistics company essentially handling and organizing how to get freight around the world. So you wonder how Best Buy gets their TVs somewhere. Hopefully we're shipping them, So my role now, when I started here, I worked on our master data team. So I worked in database, SQL mostly, dealing with API structures and services. And now I'm working on a shared billing team. So that is our team that handles paying our carriers and getting money from our customers and kind of reconciling the in between so that we can figure out our books. So, but yeah, that's what I've been doing since Prime.
Awesome. Cool. So I'll just start to dive into some questions. This first kind of set of questions is like thinking about before Prime and as you're kind of figuring out if you're going to do this. I chat with a lot of people that like they're not sure, hey, is a web developer career for me? I'm not sure I'll be good at it. How did you know that you'd enjoy a career as a web developer? Or what advice do you have for people that are kind of wondering, like, is this for me?
I can give a little bit of insight for that. So I don't have a ton of tech background in my family or in my life. I remember doing, this is sort of embarrassing, but I still find funny. There was this horrible website called Neopets that was like way back in the day, and you could use HTML and CSS to like create your profile. And I thought it was really fun. And I was like, this is kind of, but I didn't really think anything of it. Like, oh, I'm not a developer. That's not a job. That's not something I can go do. And so I just never thought of it again for like 15 years or something like that. The reason that I think I knew I would like it is just because I saw it in how passionate developers that I knew were about their craft. Either a project was really super interesting, or even if a project itself wasn't super interesting, they get really into tech and they just loved it. And I love that passion behind it. I'm somebody who I love to be passionate about things that I'm into. And I really saw being in tech as a way, kind of that doorway for me to be able to say, okay, there's something that I'm really passionate about. Let's go learn it. Let's be that person that I can just take that and run with it. That's really proven the case. Like I found my niche in tech and I just love running with things.
That's awesome. So you're kind of just inspired by other people's excitement for the career path and
yeah.
And knew that you were capable of that too. Sure. Alicia, how about you? Did you worry that you wouldn't be good at it? Or when Scott kind of sent you that note, were you like, I don't know if I can do this?
Yeah, no, it's funny. I always tell this story, and I always wanted to be like my dad when I grew up, which, most little girls aren't always wanting to be their dad when they grow up, but some do, and that's totally cool. I was one of them. My dad's actually an engineer by trade. I always got into tinkering and mechanicking and building with him. I actually thought I was going to be an architect at one point, and when I was little, I told somebody, I was like, I'm going to be an engineer like my dad, I'm going to do this thing. And I got told I shouldn't because I'm a girl. So I wish I went to listen then, because I think I would have been down a different career path earlier on. But I always liked logic. I think that was the one thing I knew about myself going into and applying for Prime. Even though Scott said, do it, I was like, oh, do I really? And I was like, well, I did really like that aspect of school. Maybe this is for me. I mean, don't look at the code I submitted back then, but it was always something I really liked and I really wanted. And so when I got the opportunity, my husband's like, yeah, do it. I just thought, okay, well, let's go do it. And there are definitely things that I doubted myself for sure, but I kind of knew to my core, it was always going to be something new, something interesting. And I liked that kind of aspect of a career. I didn't want to become stagnant in a job where it just became, oh, I'm coming in, punching the clock and leaving. And this is definitely one of those roles.
Gotcha. Cool. So now that you're, and this is a question for all, Scott included, now that you're kind of all in the field, and Scott, since you've worked with so many students to change their careers, like, what do you feel like, you know, as someone that's trying to figure out if this is for them, like, what are the kind of characteristics of a good web developer? Like, when you're kind of reflecting on your team, what?
Yeah, I'll hop in first. You know, I think that the thing I always hear as an instructor, and the thing I always hear is, like, as I'm talking to people about this, is that there's this automatic assumption that you need to be good at math. And like, whoa, okay, hold up a second. It's not math. And you know, Alicia kind of hit on this a little bit. And people need to realize that logic is different than math. And you know, like in general, if you are surfing Facebook and you see something like, you know, like, well, if bananas plus apples equals 20, you know what I'm talking about, like these little logic challenges, that like those kinds of things interest you. I think that's kind of like a good like indicator that like, you know, there might be something here about programming. But the other thing too is that like programming has just grown so much in the past few years that you know, you can go into a logical side of programming, you can go into more visual side of programming, and I know a lot of people who are motivated by the visual side and the UI. So I think that, you know, I don't want to like make a blanket statement and say like programming is for everybody, because, you know, there are some things that make it, you know, not exciting to everybody, but there's certainly abundance of resources out there where you can like just dip your toe in programming a little bit and see if it's something that energizes you. I do think that one of the things that a lot of people coming into programming need to get a handle on too is a little bit of like this learn by doing, and as a result kind of experiencing a little bit of failure and frustration. But you know, if you can get kind of past, you know, some of those like those micro failures and really latch on to like where the successes are and like those wins, programming gets to be incredibly rewarding. Like I could spend all day on a problem, and then finally, like, you know, the green light goes off and I'm like, oh, you know, then I'm euphoric at that point. And like, I don't, you know, my journey into programming didn't happen until my late 20s. I didn't go to college to study programming. You know, it's something that I kind of picked up on my own. I definitely think that I wouldn't have, like early in my 20s, and certainly while I was in school, I didn't think that I was going to be a programmer. And in a lot of ways, I still like, I'm not a programmer, like, but I am. And it's kind of weird because like, it's just, it's oddly rewarding in a way I never thought it was going to be. Like whenever you kind of walk into a room, you see a bunch of programmers, you see a bunch of code on the screen, you think that's what programming is, but really it's just a bunch of people passionate about solving problems and kind of thinking through and you know, experiencing those micro failures into these big successes. And so I guess my just general advice for, you know, people looking at programming as an option is like, just dip your toe a little bit and see if you like it. And then, yeah, I think you might be surprised. And I don't, you know, you'll stop seeing the code and you'll start seeing it as something different.
Yeah. What about you, Alicia? You're kind of nodding your head. What do you think are like good characteristics of a good web developer?
Yeah, kind of to echo off of that, you know, I kind of similar to Tracy. I remember taking over a summer course when I was in like junior high, some like random HTML website development and, you know, making some, I'm not kidding, Britney Spears website. And yeah, for you guys who know me, yeah. And, you know, I think when it comes to web development, there's so many different resources out there. There's lots of free random things you can do online, but there's also like a plethora of languages. And the one thing that you might not enjoy coding in this thing over here, but you find something else that's different. Syntactically, you can figure out other ones, right? You get that base level of knowledge and then you can kind of equate and relate. Also, I think like Scott's saying, when I go back to Prime here in Minnesota and go do speeches to them or talks with them, I usually make it open forum for many reasons because I want to tell them my experience. But I also remember being in a group with people who hadn't experienced Prime, or nobody who knew somebody who went to Prime, or because we were the first. And so I always tell them the one thing that is more frustrating, but also the most rewarding is when you fail, and you fail hard and you keep failing hard. And then all of a sudden you have that moment of like, heck yeah, got it. And I wish I would have made more mistakes. And I know that sounds weird and to the cause, but it really is making a mistake. And once you get over that hump, it's just like, holy bucket, I did it, And I think those are the things, I think if you're somebody who doesn't like giving up and who likes trying and likes to problem solve, those are traits that are really strong in, I think, any field, but development specifically, because it is a unforgivable, the computer only does what you tell it to kind of situation. So
sure. I'm jealous of that feeling of euphoria that you all are talking about. I want to feel it. How about Tracy? Do you have any thoughts on just like when you kind of look at good programmers, or just kind of characteristics?
I do. I remember I'd written something down when you kind of told me that this question was coming, and I kind of boiled it down to two things that I saw that made really good developers are teamwork and tenacity. Like Alicia just said, like the tenacity part of you just have to keep trying. Like some of the best developers I know are not people who have all the answers. They're people who are like, whatever, I'm going to try this thing. And if it doesn't work, we'll try something else. And if that doesn't work, we'll try something else. And if I have to stay, and work an entire day on one problem, that's fine. But I now at least know more about the problem to fix it. And I still love it. It's a little hard sometimes. Like there are some times where I'm just sitting there beating my head against the keyboard going, what am I doing? There's something called imposter syndrome where every so often I'm like, oh God, this is bad. I don't know what is going on, but you just keep at it. And that feeling of like, no, I got this is amazing. And then that also kind of leads into teamwork is that some of the best developers I know work really closely with the rest of their team. No one person knows everything about everything. And so if I'm beating my head against a keyboard for a little while, I might go ask somebody who I know who has more experience in maybe the technology that I'm working on at the time. And a good developer, a good teammate will be able to help you work through that and figure out where kind of you're getting stuck. And then the flip side of that is that you as a developer can take the things that you're really good at and then help other people in your team. And so like the best people I've ever had on my team have been people who are willing to work with others.
Cool. Teamwork. Yeah.
And to bounce off of that a little bit, it's also one of those things that I think, like Tracy's saying with teamwork, that especially when you're new and you're green, you have that imposter syndrome, but it's those moments where you find somebody who's been doing this for their whole lifetime and it's just come at them innately, or it's, they went to a different program or they went to college, whatever it may be, and they're teaching you something. And then the next day where you think, oh, I always have to go to them, they're coming to you and they're saying, hey, I don't know this thing that I know you know. And that's what's great about being in this kind of environment, but also when you get into the environment and makes a good developer for sure.
I have to hop in because I just want to say one more thing too. A good trait I think for a lot of people approaching programming is certainly the self-forgiveness of like, not knowing the answer. Like I think, we've hit on imposter syndrome a couple of times, and I think that really just roots back into being humble and exhibiting humility. And I think that like that's a really important characteristic and really important trait is that and a big mistake I think a lot of people make when they enter the programming fields, they feel like they need to know all the answers. And like, listen, I've hired a lot of developers, and the thing that I always say is like, I'm going to get to a point where you don't know something. Like I don't expect somebody to know all the answers. And I'm mostly curious about how people handle that specific point, because, programming changes every single day. Like new libraries are coming out, new languages are coming out, new things are coming out all the time. It'd be unrealistic for me to expect you to know the answers to every single thing and every new thing that comes out. So I want people on my team who we're all going to learn together. And the only way that we're going to learn together is if we communicate and we're positive to each other and we're helping each other out and we're contributing, we're asking questions. And so I think curiosity is important, but also like just that the humility to be put yourself in that position and to ask those questions, and understanding that though asking that question doesn't define who you are as a human, but it does define who you are as a developer. And trust me, I'd rather answer 100 questions than not answer any, because if I'm not answering any, it means that something's wrong and you're not communicating with me. Anyways, I just wanted to tack that in.
Totally. Tack a little bit on that too with him is one of my favorite, and some of my favorite times when we were in class, all three of us, is somebody would come to Scott or our at the time Joseph or Joel with a problem and they didn't know it, they wouldn't lie to us. They wouldn't say, hey, I know the answer to that. They would say, let's dig in, let's figure it out, and those are better traits of being, either teaching the kids or kids, we're kids now, teaching the students and teaching the teachers, like what it would be a good community of developers.
Awesome. So great. That was lots of different points on people kind of thinking through, am I a good fit, teamwork, problem solver, never giving up, cracking away at the problem, being okay if you don't know the answer. In fact, sounds like it's very normal. So kind of switching gears a little bit, question for our alumni. So we'll be chatting with students that are interested in being a part of Prime's very first cohort that Scott will be leading up. Tracy and Alicia, I know you were a part of the beta cohort in Minneapolis with Scott in 2015. So even though Prime was kind of just getting started and we were new to the community, do you feel like your instructors and kind of the greater Prime team were dedicated to your success, or any advice that you have for kind of this first cohort coming in and being like, they're kind of new to the community? I'll start with Tracy.
I can think of a little bit. Is that was something that I did have to think about at first. I was talking with my then boyfriend of okay, there's this opportunity in front of me. It had never really been tried before. Boot camps are now kind of becoming more of a thing, but at the time it was really radical. And so I wasn't sure, maybe nothing will come of this. I don't know. And then I thought about it is, the good thing about being the first is that you also have the added support, because Prime wants their grads to succeed. That is something that sets Prime apart from other boot camps that I've seen, is the support is amazing that's there. And so you get to come in on that ground floor and you get to get running right away, and you have so much attention from the faculty around you, from the support staff. It's really nice to kind of come in and just have that it feels, I keep using the word support. I'm trying to think of a synonym, but really support is what keeps coming back to me. And I liked that. Plus, honestly, it's kind of nice to get in the beginning because, and this is weird to say, but there's not as much competition. We've had 3.5 years now of Prime grads. And while I'm not competing with them because I'm not on the same level with them, it's kind of nice to be like, hey, we're a new breed. We're a brand new developer. We have skills that are relevant to what you are looking for right now. You don't have to wait 4 years for me to get out of college. I'm here. Hire me. And that's there. So I don't know. I liked it.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and that paired with Kansas City has a great, they have a tech talent shortage too. So it's definitely in our students' favor. Alicia, what was kind of your experience kind of taking the leap of faith and being Prime cohort number 1?
Yeah, it was, it was different, right? Like Tracy's saying, it was new for especially the Midwest. There's proven boot camps in, the coast where all those tech spots are and, whatnot. However, the middle of this country has a lot of tech talent and a lot of ability to grow that talent. I think everybody talks about, well, it's not, technically an accredited, you don't get out with a degree, all those things. And I think the thing that made me actually want to join was that reason. And that one of the biggest reasons, because their curriculum could adjust much more rapidly and much more quickly for what was needed for the now, while also getting those base concepts and learning all those things that make a good developer inside of coding and outside of coding. I mean, like Tracy was kind of alluding to, we did have the benefit of being the first, which was everybody hands on deck, let's get these guys going, let's make sure they succeed. But we also had the benefit of starting off a great program, hopefully proving it out, but also having the end support. Like once we were done, it wasn't like, bye, good luck, I hope you get it. It was, hey, what can we do as a team here to keep you growing? While they were also teaching other classes, come back to Prime, come talk to us, help me with leads. I can network with you. I can work on your resumes. I can, help you with those soft skills. I don't have problems with soft skills most of the time. I chat a lot as they laugh in the background. But we had people who were 19 in their shell, not wanting to talk, they just wanted to code. In the end, that person gained so much confidence in their abilities to be in a room, talk about what they can do and how they do it, that it made them even more appealing to this market. So they had the skill side and the soft side and those communication skills. So the support from the staff, not to blow up Scott's head, but was really great. He, if somebody was crying in the corner, because they didn't get to see their kid, they made sure you were okay, or they made sure that you had the necessary things you needed to learn a new skill. And they never gave up on you, which was, it tells the type of staff, but it also tells the type of community that they want to build. So.
Totally. Speaking of kind of soft skill development, I actually had to switch rooms for this webinar as we had the public speaking lesson going on in our common space. So cool. I'd like to switch gears a little bit and kind of look at your time at Prime. So Tracy and Alicia, if you could kind of go back, put yourself in those kind of full-time weeks in the classroom, starting with like, what did a typical day look like for you guys? What were you and Scott and the other instructor up to?
So let's see. I'll be honest. I have the memory of a goldfish, so my long-term memory isn't great. But what I remember is just, it was a lot of.
Tracy's like, I forgot.
I forgot good chunks of my life during that time. But part of it is just because you become so focused on what you're doing. It was actually really nice in a way. I know one of the things that I was originally worried about is that because it's full time, it would be almost impossible to hold down a job and do this at the same time. So I knew that I was coming into this with 100% of my attention focused on this. And so I remember one of the things that Scott actually started us to do, and I still try and do it and I fail miserably, but like, he's really good at, you know what, we're going to do things for an hour, but your brain's going to fizzle at that point. So let's go take a break for 10 minutes. You know what? And I still will do that now, where if I'm stuck on something or if I have to learn a new framework again, I'll do something for about an hour, take 10 minutes, go get some coffee. I'm addicted to coffee, and it's a great excuse for me getting away from my desk, and it kind of recharges your batteries. The other part of it is it is a lot of work because it is so condensed. But at the same time, because it's so immersive too, is that like, I remember there were days where I'd be working on something with Joseph and I couldn't figure it out. And I would go home and I would literally dream in code, and I would wake up the next day and I would suddenly have the answer, and I'd come running back. And I was so excited because, like we had mentioned before, that tenacity part where it's like, oh, I got it. I can run and I go get it. I would also just sometimes get home, and my husband, or my now husband at the time boyfriend, was very sweet. And he's just like, you look tired. And I'm like, well, yeah, I've been, exercising the biggest muscle I have for 8 hours straight. And I just face plant into the couch. So it was tough in that it was very intense, but I think that actually was the best way that I could have learned, because if I didn't have that focus, I'm somebody who gets distracted. So that focus really helped me to learn it and really solidify it.
Cool. Yeah. And it's fun to hear that you're kind of still using you're alluding to like the soft skills that you learned. It's not just the technical skills of like taking a break and,
all of them.
Yeah.
All
yeah. Alicia, how about you? What do you think? How do you think of a typical day at Prime when you look back?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's funny. I remember some of the best things that we did at Prime were those moments of taking a break or getting knowledge from other people in different ways, or, even at a high level when you're talking to another, classmate and saying, hey, what are you doing for your personal project? And they start throwing out and spitballing what they're doing. It helps them, but it also helps you. And I can remember sitting in groups and trying to just talk about normal things and getting those bonds and those relationships, but also having the ability to be like, wait, I gotta run. I think I thought of something, or, you know, when we'd have speakers come in and they would give us their nuggets of knowledge from the outside world, or all those moments. But it's funny, I thought when I was going to go into the program, it was going to be a lot of like, okay, heads down, we're just going to be coding 100% of the time, and my brain's going to hate me, and I'm going to, you know, but whatever, I'm going to get through it. And then, you know, it kind of echoes like what I do in my day-to-day now. You know, I'd say greater 50% of the time I'm in meetings, thinking of ideas, planning out solutions, you know, pre-planning stand-ups, ceremonies, all those things. Yep. And those were kind of replicated in the program. But like Tracy said, you know, it's a full-time gig and then some. You know, I had a young family at that point. I had a 1.5-year-old and a husband who was trying to support us. And it was the one thing I always think back to is I took the time to have the space for me, and you have to do that. Like, you have to go all in 100% for you, for nobody else. And the people around you are doing the same thing. So it kind of fostered this great community space.
Cool. It's fun too to hear that, like, the environment at Prime, where it wasn't just you're in a corner heads down coding, it's kind of mimicked in your professional environment too. It's collaborating with your teammates, it's thinking of ideas. Yeah. Awesome.
To kind of run off that for just a second, one of the things that actually Prime grads tend to be set apart from traditional grads is that the soft skills, the things that you learned in between. I've had the good fortune, I have 2 other Prime grads on my team right now. And at my last place, I also had 2 other Prime grads on my team. And one of the things that Prime grads are known for is that ability to kind of communicate with the rest of the team. They can talk about what they're doing. They know how to talk tech. They also know how to take a break. They know how to work with others. And those soft skills that they learned at Prime far and above set us apart.
Nice. Scott, can you kind of speak briefly too about like what, when you're kind of developing curriculum and just thinking about the type of community you want in the classroom, what type of classroom environment do you like to foster? Like, we're kind of hearing the product of it, Tracy and Lisa, but.
So I'm a huge development and education nerd. Like, I actually, you know, that period of my life where I was kind of career resetting myself into web development, and that ritual of studying every night and daily lifelong learning is not really something that's ever left me. And so as a result, I've studied a number of different things like sociology and psychology and educational theory, and how emotions affect how we learn and that sort of thing. And so when we sat down to create the curriculum for Prime, there's a ton of intentionality around understanding how the brain and how learning in a social context affects learning, paired with how the industry works. Like, I think that, you know, traditional education definitely has its place, and that, you know, I think we've done a good job saying, like, that's good. Like, it's not a bad thing. It's just that we're different. And I think one of the intentional things about how we wanted to be different was we wanted something that was super grounded in using like the best theories in education and pairing that with industry. And so a lot of what Alicia and Tracy are talking about is, P.S. there's a fun little asterisk. That's a fun question to ask them, because it kind of just validates something that they teach you when you're learning about this stuff, is that people have a hard time remembering specifics, but they remember how they feel. So it's not surprising to me that there's a lot of like talking about, like, feels like this and it feels like this, you know, like that, or it felt like this. Anyways, so we, you know, we didn't want to like lecture for 8 hours. That was never going to work. People don't learn that way. In fact, the thing that I say all the time is that you're going to learn a lot less from me lecturing compared to sitting next to somebody and solving the problem together. Like, you're both sitting down and solving the exact same problem, and that proximity is going to allow you to basically have conversations. So we try to create a lot of space, intentional space, that is still supported. Like, we're still, you know, me and the other instructor are walking around the room, we're answering questions. I'm not giving you the answer, but I'm helping you find the answer, sort of thing. And so it'd be really easy for me to come in and just like write the code for you, but like, we're not about that, because that, in the end of the day, it just emulates the environments in which you will be working. You know, and there's other theories in there too. Like, we do a little bit of gamification, and so you know, like, there's daily challenges, of course, with, you know, whether it be a peer, but I think people typically remember the group challenges because there's a lot of like focus and intention around that. So things like, you know, you get a project for 4 hours, you're working out with the group, and then like halfway through, the client calls and changes everything on you. You have to like refactor your code really quick, and you start to learn kind of some of the industry things that are important, like defensive programming strategies and writing code that's dynamic and not hard coding things. And so, but all of that stuff is based off both educational theory and just the experiences I've had being a software engineer, and certainly the other instructors as well too. And the curriculum has changed organically. And I think Tracy hit on this a little bit, that we have the ability where we're not like, you're not going to get like a Bachelor of Science in computer science from us, but you do get a certificate of completion. We're state recognized, we're state approved. So we have freedom and flexibility to kind of adapt to the market. And so the other thing that Hitler, you had mentioned when we were kind of started talking is that, we spend a lot of time talking to industry, because even my perspective is not enough. Like, you don't want to learn just, learn from Scott's experience. I want to go out and talk to people who are hiring, because at the end of the day, my success is your success. Like, how you're able to provide for your family is how I'm able to provide for my family. And I like it. I want to keep doing it. So it's in my best selfish interest to make sure that your family is supported, and we're, I like you. Like, I want to hang out with you. I like Tracy and Alicia quite a bit. Like, I'm happy to have had them as a student. Yeah, just a little bit. But it's, but that's all that intentionality around creating community and creating and being extremely effective with our time, and making sure that there's no, like, the thing I always tell the instructors, 0 dead air. Everything's intentional. So that's a blurb. I could talk about this topic for 8 hours, but
Tracy and Alicia, what was it like working with Scott and your other instructor? Can you, like, Scott was kind of telling us about the classroom environment. Like, what was that dynamic and relationship like with your instructor?
So one of the things, I honestly, I think Scott is an amazing instructor, and I'm not just, saying that for whatever, but I mean it, because one of the things that Scott did that was really well is he didn't just teach us, okay, here's what you're supposed to type to do things. It was why, like, how is this working? What are we actually doing? The curriculum has changed with what they're doing now for even what we learned 3 years ago. I actually have been having a lot of fun talking to other students, because what they learned is totally different than what I did, because they're just updating all the time. But what I really liked about having Scott as a teacher is that he brings it to you as somebody who is seeing you as another developer. You aren't just a student. You aren't just coming in. Yeah. You are coming in to be a developer. And so it's really not this like, hi, I'm the teacher, all high and mighty, and you're the students. It really is just like, we're partners in this. We're going to teach you what you need to know. We're going to teach you how to ask for what you need. And it's really open, and you're encouraged to ask questions. Like, there's no like shame in saying, I didn't understand what you just taught for the last hour.
Yeah.
I get some help, because God knows I did that a lot. But I really, really enjoyed that. And especially just kind of all of the care and attention that he put into the classroom.
Cool. That's a cool point on, like, Scott, you're almost like treating your students like a colleague. Like, you are already from day one, you are web developers. Cool. What about Alicia? What can you say about kind of the dynamic with Scott and your other instructor?
Is Scott's face getting worried yet? I'm kidding. So, it's funny, because I actually do have this type of relationship. He used to kick me out of class every so often, kick me out, and air quotes, because it was that environment that, he's relatable. And I would say all of the people that I've encountered through the time that I've followed up with Prime are relatable. They're developers who have worked in the field, or people who have had similar experiences and how they came up, or they appreciate diversity. But also, I think for me, what I appreciated a lot about Prime too, besides Scott and then, Mark and Fred, two people who obviously are still involved in Minneapolis and likely would be involved in Kansas City. But it was a ratio that wasn't too many people. I can remember doing college courses where it was like, you're just a person in the room, right? Yeah. You're not really getting anything out of it, because, you don't want to disrupt the whole class. Well, guess what? And here you have only maybe 20 people to hide behind, maybe 21. And, they're going to see you wondering and going, hey, why are you giving that face? Or, hey, why aren't you doing that? They have that.
Like, they're watching you. They're very in sync with.
And they know imposters, and they know how that works, where you don't want to be the one, but you need to be the one asking. So I think it's that kind of detail that really stands out because of the smallness, but also because of, like Scott's saying, like he wants to succeed selfishly. And then you're like, well, I wanted to succeed so that he doesn't fail, because, oh my gosh, if I can't do this, he's out of a job, like I don't want to be that person, and it's just ownership. Not that I would ever, like we would never blame anybody, but like, it's just those times where you feel
you're all in it together. Yeah.
That's definitely the way that the cohort that I was in, we absolutely became a team. There was 20 of us, and like, there were times when I would be, just face down on the couches in the common room, just like, I made a mistake. What am I doing with my life? And, Alicia would come over and be like, no, we got this. Like, we're a team. We'll figure this out. And I still absolutely adore my entire cohort. I keep in touch with almost everybody. And it's that sort of almost family that you get with your teachers, your instructors, and the cohort itself. Becomes just a really special network that you don't find like very often. I love it.
That's awesome.
Disclaimer, I never kicked Alicia actually out of the classroom.
Booted. How about back to kind of Alicia and Tracy. How do you feel like Scott and the rest of the team, and kind of our next section of questions is getting into your job a bit, but like, how do they help prepare you for actually landing a job?
I can kind of maybe start here. What's funny? I ended up at C.H. Robinson, which is a third-party logistics company, right? So we that doesn't sound super cool. They set you up with success for like all those soft sides, right? We learned how to communicate, but we also had mock interviewing. We had resume building workshops. We talked to people who had specialty in interviews and how to get hired in this industry, but also they gave us an opportunity to interview real interviews with their network. And they had I can't even remember how many people or how many companies at this point, but we had 15 minutes to talk to all these companies in Minnesota, whether they were a small startup or a Fortune 500 company. And it, gave us the opportunity to keep trying. I joke about this, but C.H. Robinson was nowhere on my radar. And now I've been here for 3.5 years because they came to a session at Prime to talk to us. And I was like, I got 15 minutes to do stuff. I'll go talk to him. And turns out they ended up being the place I wanted to go to. So, I mean, they really support the skills, the learning, but they also support that after side where you're done with school and now you're, really needing help to meet new people in the industry. So,
cool. So your current employer was actually someone that was part of it was part of the program and you met them through Prime. That's cool.
Yeah.
That actually happened to me too, sort of. So I have a couple things that I was thinking of, but one of them is that we had these things. We had mentors in our group, and which was I love the idea of somebody that you're actually paired up with who's in the industry right now, and it kind of gives you a good insight into like, answering the questions that aren't necessarily code, like what does your daily life look like? What are you working on right now?
We're asking you right now.
Yeah. How did you get hired? Because I want to get hired somewhere. Like, those questions that you get. And one of my mentors ended up ultimately hiring me. Reher was a place I never would have thought to apply for. And because on paper they're not the most interesting sounding company, but it was probably one of the so far one of my favorite teams I've ever worked on. But yeah, so it's just one of those things where it's like that network that I got from Prime through my mentors, through the job interviews, things like that, really ended up coming in handy and getting me a job almost right out of the gate. But one of the other things I kind of ended up learning that I still use is how to learn. Scott touched on this a little bit. The tech industry moves too fast. Like the things that I learned 3.5 years ago, or almost 4, coming up on 4 years ago now in Prime, aren't actually used much in the tech industry anymore. So I've had to learn at least, I think, 5 other languages now since I've left. And that ability of, okay, I only have so much time, I got to learn something, from scratch. How do I do that? That's something that, we got from Prime that has become invaluable. I've learned more about how I need to learn. I'm somebody who can't just read the documentation and go, okay, this is how it goes. I have to be immersive. So like I've learned that means I might need to do videos. I might need to find other people and have them teach me something. But that kind of self-awareness of how you learn and how you continue to grow has been invaluable in my job.
Yeah.
But then also things just like how to interview, how to talk to your team, how to ask for help. There was somebody that came in and actually talked to the class. That was somebody who has answered almost more questions on Stack Overflow than anybody else that we will ever meet in person. And one of the things that he taught us was how to ask a question. And I can't tell you how many times this has come in handy in my own teams. And like, I have a couple people on my team right now who keep coming to me because they're like, this is my problem. I don't know how to Google for this, but I know there's an answer out there somewhere. And I'm like, okay, well, let's reframe the question and figure it out. And that's totally something I learned at Prime. That's, a funny little thing that just kind of comes in handy still.
Yeah, no, that's kind of is related back to you guys talking about the characteristics of a good developer, and yeah, you're able to articulate a question. That's a skill in itself. Scott, from your perspective, why do you think? Oh, actually, I want to back up. So, Tracy, you mentioned you landed a job shortly after. How long did it take for you guys to land your first job?
I was hired about a month after graduation. So, and part of that is just because tech companies do have a tendency to be notoriously slow. So it took me like, I started the interview process pretty much the day I graduated.
Okay.
And it just took that long. These companies can be slow.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it was about 5 weeks.
5 weeks? Okay, cool.
We had people in our cohort, Scott, right, that had a job before we were done. We had, I think, a couple.
Yeah, certainly people have gotten jobs prior to graduation. Really just in the job hunt in general. You put the more work you put in, the more yield you're going to get out of it. So, and we handle that. Like we talk to folks kind of at the last phase of the program about what steps they should be following, what kind of behavior set they should have to ensure that we can get them to employment as fast as humanly possible. And Tracy had mentioned it a little bit there too. Sometimes HR just takes time. And one of the things that we're finding out in Kansas City is that the HR process is much different from Minneapolis, which is interesting, right? Like, so that's part of the reason why we like to immerse ourselves in the community, is just to understand like what's this process going to look like? Because it'd be easy for some big educational entity to just be like, okay, well, Kansas City is in the same geographical region as Minneapolis, therefore things should be all the same. But like, once you dig in and meet people and have lunch with them and talk to them and meet them in their space and talk to them about how they do things, you just find out that things are different, which is like why I moved from Minneapolis into Kansas City. And I wanted to be in market, immersed in understanding exactly how this works and like, how does Kansas City work? So.
Yeah. And Scott, like from your perspective, why, and kind of just your history of helping students land jobs, like why are employers, why do they love our grads? And I think Tracy, you both mentioned like many of them hiring several of our grads. Like, what is it about Prime grads that our employers like?
Yeah, I certainly, the last thing I want to do is discredit like the way people are doing other things. And so this is more, I'm just talking about what makes us different and why a Prime grad looks so much different from other, not only like someone who graduates with a computer science degree, but also other boot camps. And if you ever talk to me about boot camps, I really like to distance ourselves from that moniker, because I just think we're different. But the phrase soft skills is thrown around a lot, and I think that there's a little bit of like this, like, oh, like that's touchy feely stuff, and it's like, okay, well, maybe a little bit, but like the other thing that the other word I like to use is if there's soft skills, there's also firm skills. And so what the classification of firm skills is kind of where I think a lot of employers really gravitate toward to Prime grads. And so when I say firm skills, what I mean is it's not quite technical, it's not quite soft, it's more about the business and how the business works. So Tracy and Alicia have both touched on the importance of communication. And so the last thing we do is put up a PowerPoint deck and talk about, this is communication and this is how you communicate. We lead by example. So we put students into scenarios where They're practicing different communication skills. Sometimes that comes in the form of speeches. Sometimes that comes in the form of group work that has some intentionality around how communication happens. But to an employer like that, like somebody who can, as Tracy mentioned, like ask questions or, take and absorb a question and help translate, like those are all things that like we really focus on. Other things like version control and how to work with multiple people working on the same code base. It's not quite necessarily technical and more like a theory-based thing. Like I said, so much of the curriculum comes from the industry that the reason why Prime grads end up looking like a lot more like a developer who has 1 or 2 years is because we've kind of hyper accelerated them through a lot of those like stressful learning points where if you haven't had a developer job before and you're coming out of college, like you might not understand how to work with version control on a team, where if you go through Prime, like you're gonna have branched off the master repo off to develop off to separate feature branches. You're gonna have merged in things, gone through the bugs, absorbed other people's code, and you're gonna have like been doing what you're going to be doing. And so that way it's a lot easier for a Prime grad to kind of hit the ground running. And to be clear, like I think that like the last thing I want to promise is that Prime solves all of employers' problems, because I think there is a time and a place to get people from different entities other than Prime. But what's nice about Prime is that a lot of our students are able to hit the ground running. Our students have certainly at this point, now that they've been graduated for 3 years, are accelerating into like senior developer roles or leadership roles because of the soft and firm skill set that they grab from Prime. And then they grab additional technology. As Tracy had mentioned, you end up learning more because technology is moving so fast. And she also mentioned that the curriculum has been updated so many times. And but the last thing I want to do to somebody is graduate them with the skills and abilities that will only last them about a year. Our focus and our intention is to make sure not only are you good for your first job, but you're good for your next 6 jobs, because like that's the win scenario for all of us. And I think that it really kind of, as a testimony to that, one of my favorite things that happens is that the graduates who have been promoted to leadership roles will actually come back to Prime and like do interviews and interview current Prime students to help build out their team, because they know what that team or what those students represent.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Not to plus one, Scott, but one thing, 2 jokes, or 2 things, one a joke. There was at one point, I think, a student in Prime talking, he keeps saying intentionality. There was one time where we were theorizing why they put together a core group of people to do something, because you're like, what are we trying to get out of this? Why are we the 4 people? What do you have that I don't have? Or we'd start kind of gamifying it for ourselves, which I think is funny. But when I talk about the skill sets of Prime people versus other boot camps that I've encountered at my job, because we actually are really, C.H. Robinson's very, very big into hiring interns, people from different backgrounds, people who don't come just from CS degrees. So we have different kind of people from different places. The one thing that I've seen that Prime has been taught, or through Prime we've been taught, is all about those other skills that maybe developers take for granted, like how to work in source control, how to work in a legacy code, how to debug, those kind of things. And those kind of like skills, a lot of people didn't get in other areas when they were in CS class or on their own, because they didn't have the opportunity to work with other people as closely as we did.
Gotcha.
Well, into +2, sorry, but that actually can be a really, really big strength for employers, which is one of the bonuses to having Prime grads mixed with people from other backgrounds. When I was at Reher, I was actually the first person to ever come from a non-traditional background. Everybody else was college graduate. I dropped out. I used to be ashamed of that. I'm not anymore, because now I'm a Prime grad. So, but like just that idea of like the background that I had was totally different than the background that they had. And we could work together and become a much more full picture of a development team. One of my guys, Alex, who I absolutely adore, hates the front end with a boiling passion. But I love it because it was something that I found in some group thing that I was doing. Everybody else was like, oh, CSS, oh God, I hate it. I don't know what's going on. And I'm like, I love it. Give me all your CSS. And so between the 2 of us, we could totally, kick ass on some project that we were working on, because we knew how to take our skills and mesh them together. And that was something that is awesome about Prime.
Nice. So Scott, you kind of mentioned like our grads are becoming leaders at companies. Alicia, I know that you mentioned like you've been at the same company, and I think you're on your third promotion at your job. How do you guys how do you feel about kind of just your future and what's ahead of you and this kind of new career path you're on?
Yeah, I'm on my third at C.H. Robinson. Obviously, I don't know what that looks like if I were to move to another company. I'm assuming I still get to be like a senior developer, but it's interesting. I'm at the year end. We're doing our reviews. We're doing all those kind of fun, like, what are you going to be next kind of situations. And, one things that I actually got to talk to my director about yesterday, because I wanted direct feedback from her. She and I were talking about, okay, well, what does it look like for Alicia in the coming year, 2019? What are we talking about goals? And she said, the one thing that I think if you can work on, which Scott will laugh at, is your confidence. And once you, because once you have that, you're unstoppable. And I kind of giggled. I was like, man, Scott's going to kick me when I tell him that. But she's like, you have so many opportunities, whether or not it's being a developer or maybe becoming a lead developer on a project or even going into management of people. And she's like, you kind of have the BS monitor for software and you also have the BS monitor for business. So you have this kind of like unique opportunity to do whatever you want. And those are kind of the best parts about Prime. I always, when I go back to talk to people at Prime, you can see sometimes the doubt in their face, like, oh, can I really do this in real life? Oh my gosh, I'm going to be a developer. Oh, and it's like, hey, pump the brakes, man. Like, you start as a developer, you could be a project manager, you could be an agile coach, you could be a QA, you could do anything because you have this different perspective of a business mind, a software kind of mind, and all these other firm soft skills, and those are traits that lead to more and more opportunities for you in a growing industry.
Awesome. The foot in the door, right? And then the possibilities are endless. Tracy, what about you? How do you feel about kind of what's ahead for you in this new career path you're on?
I don't know. I'm kind of like to touch on what Alicia said, it's kind of fun in that, like, before I went to Prime, I never would have thought that I had a career because I didn't know what I was doing. I popped around. I did retail. I did admin. I traveled with the Renaissance Festival because I was weird. And like, if you would ask me, like, what are you going to do in 5 years? I would never know. And now, like, it's kind of fun because I still don't always know, but that's almost because I have so many opportunities and, like, I just want to know where my passion is going to go next. One of the things that I had found was absolutely my passion when I was working at Reher is I worked with a lot of guys who were really big into backend. So I, while I was there, it was a full stack dev. So I worked on the front end code with JavaScript and also the back end code with Java, which is something I had to pick up on the job. And I found I hate backend. I am not a backender. I apparently don't have the right kind of thought process, and I don't care. I'll say that. But I love UI. Anytime the browser is in front of me, I understand what's going on with CSS. I like taking a UX design, breaking it down into components, understanding how to reuse things, make things just like beautiful Lego bricks of code. And I ended up doing that with the job that I have right now. I got hired on to, a pretty major company. They basically, in the job description said, we want somebody to come in and tell us what to do. And that was like nerve-wracking and also really, really cool because they're like, we don't know what we want to do. We don't know how this is going to work. Come in and tell us. And so I've been able to come in and do this like component library building thing. I've been able to tell their UX team where they need to improve and how to get to where they want to go. And I also kind of like that a little bit about like where I'm contracting right now is that I'm actually already thinking, what do I want to do next? I'm actually kind of thinking UX. I know there's a UX cohort thing too, but I probably will just see where I can take it the direction that I'm going.
But you feel like empowered to do so just with how much you've learned and grown. Oh
yeah, absolutely. Yep. I'm literally learning both React and Vue at the same time because I like to be hard at myself. So, but Prime gave me the ability to do that. So
yeah. Cool. So a couple of questions, about 2 questions left and we'll wrap up. But yeah, okay. So like a big part of our student success is kind of our close connections and relationships to the tech community, which we've kind of been talking about. And we're super excited to be building those in Kansas City for our new campus. How do you guys feel when you tell people like you're a Prime grad? And can you kind of just tell me a little bit about Prime's reputation in the community and what's to come in Kansas City for our new students?
So I think I am a huge proponent of Prime. It's actually funny. I have a funny habit of missing the bus in the morning, so I tend to take Lyft in a lot. And I can't tell you how many times I end up extolling the virtues of Prime to my Lyft drivers. So just in case you guys are ever like doing commission based, just let me know. But like because I do like I like the format a lot, because there's a lot of us who didn't do great in traditional schools, and like I used to think, you know what, I'm never going to have a career because I can't sit there and listen to some person lecture 50 people in a night class and then try and do a thesis paper. I just am not capable of doing that. But I have a career now. And Prime grads are like that. You can get these people who have diverse backgrounds, who maybe aren't traditional grads, who, you know, have come from business backgrounds. They maybe know, you know, Alicia came from a sales side. She knows the sales side of how things work, and she uses that to her benefit. You know, I had a little bit of marketing experience. My sister is in marketing. And so that kind of design feature I end up using to my advantage that other people on my team maybe don't have, but I know how to take that and add it. And so Prime grads have that reputation of being very, they're being, they're really good at just like taking things, trying to figure it out and running with it. You know, you'll occasionally get people who have that like, oh, well, you don't have a traditional CS degree. And the thing is that when you find that people, the great thing, you know, as a Prime grad, I know those people aren't good employers, so I don't really want to work for them. If people don't know how to work with young developers, you learn just as much. But I love all the opening that I give. I love having other Prime grads on my team. I know that they can be trusted. I know they know how to learn. I know that they're going to ask for help.
Yeah.
They have great reputation.
Cool. Alicia, what do you think about kind of our reputation in the community and hopefully what we can be building in Kansas City?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's interesting because, you know, again, I think I said this earlier, you know, we shouldered some responsibility that if we didn't succeed, Prime might not have. So maybe there's a different feel there, but I know that's not true. I just, I think from what I know about the community, even the grads that we have, you know, most of them have been successful, and a lot of people have nothing but good things to say about Prime. I think about Prime. I think you're going to find naysayers. I think that's always going to be a thing. You even find it from day to day in here. You know, I think, I don't know if we still have it, but C.H. Robinson has been known to hire a lot of Prime grads. I think at one point we were at 23. Now we're a company of 600 or maybe 700 developers at this point. So we're pretty big. So the numbers are, you know, not like high percentage by any stretch of imagination. But, you know, I've met people who have said things to me in this company like, oh, gosh, those Prime grads. And it's like, I'll look at them and be like, hey, guess what? You're talking to one. And they're like, wait a minute. No, yeah, no, not kidding. I was the first hire here. And then it kind of takes a minute of proudness to be like, no, like, everybody's different. I can say the same thing about, you know, I've met some pretty crummy CS people, and I've met some people who are crummy who've learned it on their own. I've met some just crummy people in general, you know, like it doesn't matter. And I think once you kind of put those naysayers down, or you prove them wrong, you know, you work hard, you show them and say, it gives people a different perspective. And I'd say a lot of companies within the Minneapolis, St. Paul, greater cities knows the product that Prime puts out. While you may get a bad egg, maybe, it's not about Prime, it's about the person. And Prime teaches the skills throughout all of us. It's dependent on that person how to deal with them. So I'd say 99.9% of the time, it's good people though.
Okay, so last quick question to wrap it up. I'll start with Scott. What is in just a sentence or two, like what is your final piece of advice for people that are on the fence about making this career change like you, taking that leap? Sentence or two. Scott?
Yeah, totally. Ask questions. I think no hard sell. Just get your questions answered. Like, we're not here to push anybody. We just want things for you. And so just you can take from us even though you're not a student. So just come in, ask questions, reach out to us. We're more than happy to answer them. And I'm more than happy to pair you up with somebody who's not me. So I can pair you up with other grads who have experienced the program. Ask questions.
Cool. Alicia, final piece of advice for those on the fence.
Yeah, trying. I think there's always something you can do to try, and reaching out in your network and understanding. The biggest thing that you can do about figuring out if this is right for you is the feeling you get when you're asking those questions and what it makes you want to do more with. But also, there's always a free something, a free meetup, a free session you can attend. And if Prime's something that you're interested in, really put it in for yourself and only for yourself.
Cool. Tracy, how about you? Final piece of advice.
God, only a sentence or two, huh? Because I know I've got so many things. To mimic, also, asking questions, but also just if you're trying to think if this is something good for you, like just strip away all the barriers in your mind. If you are somebody who looks at the idea of in 20 weeks from now, if I were given the skills to take my life in a totally different direction and just run with it, is that something I'd want to do? No, all other barriers aside, and then just kind of take a look at those barriers and be like, how big are they really? That's something that I had to do with my then boyfriend, now husband, is just like, here's all the barriers that I can think of to why I shouldn't do it. How big are they really? And we looked at it and said, you know what, this is crazy. No, of course I want to do it. This is absolutely in 20 weeks. For us, it was 18. Now it's 20 a year. I've completely turned my life around, and that's amazing. That's an amazing feeling. So, take a look at it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Break it down. Cool.
Well, we will wrap it up. Thank you, Tracy, Alicia, Scott. It was so fun to hear your stories, hear about your experiences. I hope anyone who's been thinking about trying web development skills is inspired by this crew. So we're super excited to be launching a Kansas City campus, and I hope, yeah, you can't hear the applause, you guys are muted, but hope our applicants take the leap of faith, submit their applications for our first cohort, and be a part of something really great, just like Tracy, Alicia, and Scott were. So thanks again to our panelists, and if anyone has any follow-up questions, they can email us at hello@primeacademy.io. All right. Thank you guys so much. Bye.